Welcome to Sports Bites with your host, Chris Joseph. Are you a sports fanatic who loves the thrill of the game and the delicious food that accompanies it?
And then they had chicken fingers, exotic chicken fingers.
Join us as we dive into the world of sports and the delectable bites that make the experience even better. Whether you're in the stadium, tailgating, or watching from the comfort of your home. Get ready to satisfy your sports cravings with Chris Joseph on Sports Bites. Let's dig in.
Tuesday evening, everybody. I hope you're having a great day out there. And boy, let me tell you something. I always get excited when it's time to do live broadcasts, right? It kind of reminds me of the days of being back on the radio, but I hope you guys are having a great Tuesday evening, staying dry wherever you are. It's been raining a lot here in Birmingham, getting wet. The yard is ridiculous. I hope that it stayed dry today. I hope it's dry tomorrow so I can actually do some yard work and get it taken care of. But I want to take the time to say thank you for coming in. We got a full show today. I'm going to break down the Texas spring game, Mississippi State spring game. I've got an interview that I did earlier today with J.C. Shelton of Georgia Football Live. He's the executive editor of the Players Lounge. Really knowledgeable. If there's any Georgia fans out there, I'm going to tell you what, this guy, J.C. Shelton, so you need to listen to. He does a show with Aaron Murray, former quarterback, and his tight end. So, I mean, guy knows his stuff. I'm going to talk about the Oklahoma spring game, what I saw, what I liked, what I didn't like. Then I'm going to give him a Sixer 6 picks. And today, my 6 picks is the 6 top uniforms in college football. Now, I know I'm going to upset some people. I'm probably going to upset some people in the fan base that I'm in. But we'll just have to wait and see. And also, I had a really good time this weekend. So for those that know, I've had the opportunity, I've been given the privilege of covering the UFL, the Birmingham Stallions. Now, the Birmingham Stallions, they've done nothing but great things since they've been in existence with the USFL, back-to-back champions. They've now won 11 games in a row, and it's a great environment. Now, some elements were kind of against them the last 2 weeks. First home game was the Alabama A-Day game. This Saturday, you had bad weather. I mean, we were in a lightning delay for a while, but some of the diehards, they stayed there. They stayed true. Also, Talladega was this weekend. So, I mean, there's some big pulls in the state as far as other things. So, but coming up, they got the the St. Louis Battlehawks, which will be a fantastic game. Obviously, A.J. McCarron, Alabama quarterback. He comes back home, playing at Protective Stadium and at here in Birmingham. Now, again, fantastic. I talked about it last week. My first game really being there. I was really impressed with Protective Stadium. UAB, man, I mean, I know the Birmingham Bowl is usually a really, really good crowd. So I've been really impressed, right? But as we've talked about in this show, Sports Bites, the premise of it, I talk about sports. I'm a big guy. I like food. I've talked a lot about food. Whenever I interview people, I ask them, where's the best place you ate, or what's the best meal you had when you're covering a game? I do stadium reviews, and things like that. And I found it interesting in Protective Stadium. One side, a concession stand will have like cheeseburger and stuff like that. Then the other side, where the concession stand looks similar, same name, it has pulled pork sandwiches. Now, I will say they have really good pretzels, but we try to do a lot of stuff, and I like to think that I am part of the every man that goes to football, right? Yes, I've been in the media. Yes, I get go in the but the thing that I missed the most when I was doing the media was the tailgating, the hanging out. That's why in this show, I do a lot of talking about tailgates, stuff like that. And I'm going to tell you, the South does it. I know there's some other good ones, but everywhere I've been, there's always been really good tailgates here. And I had the opportunity to meet a great group of people from Birmingham that are Stallion supporters. I've seen this tailgate the couple times that I've driven by. It's always packed, always well stocked. And so I got out of my car on Saturday walking to the game, and I was like, you know what? I have this little DJI pocket camera. I was like, I'm going to do kind of a man in the crowd interview. And I went up, I introduced myself, and they could not have been more friendly. Just a very welcoming group of Stallion fans. Come to find out, they're like the best Birmingham Stallion fans. They're the best UFL fans in the league, right? And they're called the Horsemen. If you're ever watching the games, you're going to see them. They're right front, section 104. They do a great job. But I had a chance to kind of ask them some questions about their tailgate, what made it so special, and also what led them to liking the Birmingham Stallions in a state that's driven by college football. But here's the Horsemen from Protective Stadium on Saturday. This guy, David King. So, David. Giddy up. Talk a little bit about what you guys usually do for your tailgate, food-wise.
Typically what we do every week is, depending on our opponent, we decide what is the best course of meal action for that game plan. Being like last week being Memphis, it was barbecue because there's always a rivalry between Birmingham and Memphis and barbecue. This week, we're pretending like they're Philadelphia Stars from last year, and we had Philly cheesesteak sandwiches and chicken. We usually pick a theme like that, some way, shape, or form.
And we had some Old Bay seasoning mayo in there too.
Yeah.
Old Bay for the Maryland, Virginia,
DC.
area.
We're playing the DC Pretenders.
Yeah,
So that's what we're
Pretenders.
as opposed to the
pretending.
Defenders.
Yeah.
I'd say the best thing is that huge Alabama fan, huge Auburn fan. We don't care. We're up here. We don't really even talk about it that much. All we focus on is the Stallions, and pretty much every team that's came before that. We had the Iron. It was the same way. All we care about is getting together and enjoying the people that we're with, which is basically turned into family now on the weekends.
What do you think the crowd will be like this week with no 8A game going on?
It's really hard with
Well,
Talladega.
Talladega, I forgot. Talladega, I apologize. That's a big one.
Our inside sources, and it says that we got sales of about 12 to 14,000 right now.
Does he wear suspenders?
He does not wear suspenders.
Okay.
But he actually does work for the league. Now, whether we see 12 or 14,000 scanned tickets today, that's a different story. But we've got about 12 to 14 sold.
Gotcha. It should be a lot of fun.
Oh.
Any secrets, any tips for a good tailgate food-wise?
No, we have something that's consistent that I usually make. And it's a layer cookie that everybody in the country makes. But I call them buckum bars.
That's right.
Because that's who we are. We're Stallions and we buck them, baby.
That's right.
That's right.
That's
So that's
awesome.
just consistency.
There you go. That's the key to it. Guys, I appreciate it. Enjoy the game.
All right.
And giddy up.
Yeah.
Just a great group of people. And that's what it's about. And I'll tell you, for those who don't live in the state, I have a lot of friends back in Oklahoma. We talk about it. But when I moved here, I was asked the question, who do you root for? Like, I'm an Oklahoma fan. No. Who do you root for? Like, I'm an Oklahoma fan. They're like, no, you don't get it. Who do you, Alabama or Auburn? Like, it's a huge, and I'm not saying that there's not divides in the states to be a South Carolina, Clemson. I get it. But like, I had never been anywhere to that was one of the first questions asked. Who do you root for? And you had to choose. They want you to choose. But a group of people that get together, and I'm going to say this, kudos to them on the idea of changing the tailgate to the team. Now, those that have heard me talk before, my idea. I had an idea for like a sports bar and grill. Now, it would be extremely hard to manage, especially watching the show The Bear on Hulu right now. But it'd be very hard to control, food loss and stuff like that. We want to make sure you're doing right. But my idea was called Top 10, right? And in that, the menu would constantly change. Again, I'm not looking for like a big chain like the Cheesecake Factory knows where the menu's 117 pages. No. For those who like the Cheesecake Factory, that's good for you. But my menu would change according to the top 10 in college football. And then in college basketball, you kind of move forward. And you could work some appetizers, blue bloods, whatever like that. That was kind of my idea. Now, I know it would be extremely difficult because, if Maryland makes it to the top 10, you're having to buy crab, really good crab for crab cakes, just everything into it. What would, maybe you could use some ingredients for multiple schools. I don't know. But when I heard them say that, that's great. And I loved the camaraderie. They were celebrating, I believe it was a 70-year-old fan's birthday there. I mean, they were very welcoming. They were very inviting. And I really appreciate the fact that they took the time to even let me come over there. Because these guys have obviously been together forever. And here I am, a stranger walking into the midst of the Horsemen. But great group of people. Keep an eye out on the UFL Saturdays. If you come to a game in Birmingham, go up and introduce yourself. They're a great group of people. But to the Horsemen, thank you for your kindness. Thank you for everything, for your hospitality, and thank you for doing it the right way. That's the thing, is it was inclusive. Food they were putting the food away. I felt kind of bad. I came after the food was up, but again, great time. If you're in the Birmingham area, you're listening to me, you're coming to a game, look for the Horsemen in section 104. They're down there, and they will get you taken care of. Other than UFL, which I got to say, the Stallions are a fun team to watch. And I know we're not going to talk a whole lot about UFL, but that game, it was almost 9:00, and they still hadn't finished the first half because of the weather delay. Long night. Birmingham wins it on a field goal at the end of the game. So it was a lot of fun. A bunch of spring games this weekend, right? And a lot of stuff, focusing here kind of in the SEC. And one of the new schools joined the SEC. Of course, I'm very familiar with that school and just kind of interested. I decided to watch a little bit of the Texas spring game, right? I wanted to see what was going on. And I see, I'm playing kind of clips of it now. If you're watching on the YouTube Live, you can see the clips kind of going right now. And early on in the game, Quinn Ewers throws it in. I think that's the play right there. And Alfred Collins, big boy, trucks it 32 yards for a touchdown. You got to love a fat guy touchdown, right? Everybody loves a touchdown by the big defensive lineman. Now, gone is Devondre Sweat. Those guys, I mean, they had some great defensive linemen. Watching this game, and I always tell myself, I don't want to get too far ahead of myself when I'm talking about spring games. I was the one, and I learned early. I got burnt when I was watching Oklahoma and Trevor Knight. Now, we know Trevor Knight had the game of his life against the University of Alabama in the Sugar Bowl in 2014. But his first year, the spring game, you would have thought Trevor Knight couldn't be touched. Now, it was a little bit up-tempo. He was a little bit, riled up, obviously. But Trevor Knight had a really good spring game. So I'm like, Trevor, and again, Trevor's a great person. I just, didn't have the greatest careers at Oklahoma. That's why I ended up going to A&M. Baker Mayfield took his job. But I try to temper my reactions to spring games, okay? But in that, when you're a team like Texas, you made it to the college football playoffs last year. Everyone thinks you're going to make it to the college football playoffs again this year. You have the names, Quinn Ewers, Arch Manning, now Jonathan Brooks, still rehabbing from a knee injury. You had a lot of people, really curious who was going to tote the rock. I'll tell you this. What I saw, Isaiah Bond, Alabama's going to miss him. Now, Alabama's loaded. Don't get me wrong. Isaiah Bond's going to be a problem. And I'll say this too. Watching some of the, you can kind of see it there. I may have to eat crow on Arch Manning. I may have to eat crow on Arch Manning. Now, again, it's a spring game. The secondary, you don't know because again, you don't want to get too far ahead of yourself. Be like, say the 75-yard touchdown pass right there. You know, some secondary members not playing, but Arch Manning making the throws. And I'll say this from what I saw of his film last year in high school, you know, and he made a couple of plays, you know, while he was, you know, cleanup duty. I wasn't sold after last year, going into last year on Arch Manning. You know, I told people if his name was Arch Jones, no one would give a shit about him. That's how I felt. I could be wrong. Now, I'll say this. What I thought was impressive from Arch in this game and seeing him throw as many times as he did was, again, the change in the arm slot, how he could change his arm slot to make certain throws. Young man had a day at the spring game. Now, they did it where they had two separate teams. They had an orange team and a white team that went head-to-head. A lot of teams just had offense versus defense. You kind of rotate ones and twos. But Arch, I'm going to tell you, Arch impressed me with his footwork. He impressed me with the way he delivered the football. Like I said, his arm slot, and they're showing Bijan Robinson on the network right now. And, you know, again, a great back. But Arch Manning, and again, it's a spring game. It's going to be different. Now, as good as Texas is defensively in the front seven, they're going to get some really good looks. And it's going to be, you know, comparable. What we all saw what Texas did to Alabama last year. Now, some of those guys in the middle are gone. But again, on Arch Manning, man, I have to say that I might be wrong. Now, I want to see him play. Now, here's the thing. I joke, you see him playing here in the Texas spring game, but he won't be in the game in July when EA Sports releases the NCAA 2025 game that everybody is clamoring for, craving, wanting this new football game. What was surprising watching the Texas game, you know, with Jonathan Brooks not being there, I expected to see like a Savion Red really step up. Didn't have a great spring game. Next thing you know, Savion Red enters the transfer portal. Kid's going to be a beast. Now, Deshard Choice, who's the running back coach, former Oklahoma Sooner, former Georgia Tech Yellow Jacket, and he's the running back coach there in Texas. C.J. Baxter, Jaden Blue. I mean, when Jonathan Brooks comes back, I mean, it's like next man in line after Bijan. I mean, Texas keeps turning out backs. And yes, you have a fertile recruiting ground in Texas. You can do stuff like that. And, you know, like even being an Oklahoma fan, looking at this, trying to be objective, there seems to be something not right with the secondary for the Texas Longhorns. And I don't know if that's going to be big for them. I've heard a lot of other national pundits talk about they think that could be one of the things that hurts them. I mean, they're going to go against some really good offenses this year. Now, the front, I tell you who looked really good. And Sooner fans is going to make you mad because I know he committed to Oklahoma for a while, but Colton Bassett on the edge, that's why he was highly recruited. 3.5 tackles. I think he had 2.5 tackles for a loss. I mean, young man looked really good. But it's Texas, right? It's Texas. They're going to do what they're going to do. And they're going to continue to turn it out. I mean, I think it's 133 days away until they play Colorado State. I'm still not. Quinn put up numbers, right? He put up numbers last year. I was not a fan of his footwork. There was times it didn't aesthetically wasn't pleasing for me, if you want to put it that way, as a quarterback. And Arch, we know he has the Manning lineage. It'll be interesting to see. Now, I mean, again, I don't want to get into this, people calling for Quinn's job at the end of the spring game. That's not what this is about. But I have to say it with a smile. Arch looked good. I don't like saying it, but he looked good. All right. And it'll be interesting to see Texas coming to the SEC. Man, talk about a tough schedule. They got Georgia, Michigan, Oklahoma. I mean, they got some teams on their schedule this year. I'm so excited about Texas and Oklahoma coming to the SEC because of this new schedule. Like, I can't wait. I can't wait. But again, spring day, you don't want to get too far ahead of yourself. Texas is going to be Texas. They'll probably start the season in the top 5. We'll see how the season goes for them. Now, another game I was intrigued in seeing, covering the SEC and being down here, was in Stark, Vegas. That's right. Jeff Lebby and his crew, Showtime State, Cowbell City, baby. And I'm going to tell you the thing that I noticed watching this spring game. Blake Chapin from Baylor. An Oklahoma State fan is going to hurt, but you remember Blake Chapin from the Big 12 championship game almost was perfect against you guys. And I think he completed 17 passes in a row and won the most outstanding player in that Big 12 championship game. But Blake Chapin had a day. Whew. 18 to 22. And that's the one thing I'll say about Chapin is I think accuracy is a big thing for him, right? I talk about that game in the Big 12 championship. He had 17 in a row. 17 in a row, right? And of course, Oklahoma fans, you know about Jeff Lebby. I was surprised I didn't see as many jet sweeps watching the spring game as I did when he was at Oklahoma. But Chris Parson, the other quarterback, had a really good day. But the receiving core, there's 2 guys that have transferred in. Kevin Coleman from Louisville and Kelly Akari came in from UTEP. He was one of the best receivers in the country last year, average yards per catch, big-time threat, and he makes some good plays. Now, as you're seeing right there, that's a Tyler Woodard punched the ball out right as Coleman was coming to the goal line. Now, Tyler Woodard comes from East Mississippi Community College, and if you're saying, hey, that name sounds familiar, you're right. If you watch Last Chance U, Scuba, Mississippi, East Mississippi Community College, that's where they're at. But makes a great play. But those 2 guys, it's going to be big, right? It's going to be a different offense this year. You also have a freshman in Mario Carver from here in Birmingham, well, outside of Clay Chalkville High School, right? And he can go get it. Now you've got some tight ends, and tight end is a big part of that Jeff Lebby offense, kind of how they align, how they go for the routes. But Justin Ball, the Vanderbilt transfer, he's going to be a problem. And then you have Sadoyo Traore, the guy who set out at Colorado. And Colorado's a whole other story. Probably next week, I'll get into what's going on at Colorado for Coach Prime. I mean, it's crazy what's going on there. But with Traore and Ball, tight end room is set, right? The tight end room is set. Now, there was one moment or one stretch in the game that Traore, there's Ball right there, the tight end from Vanderbilt making a touchdown catch. But there was a time when Traore caught 6 passes in a row on a drive. And he's got the side. And it's different because Traore and Ball are 2 different type of tight ends, but I think it's going to be really big for them. Now, I'll say this. The running game, there's not a lot of big names, and it's really a lot of running back by committee. I know Oregon State's Damian Martinez, I'm sorry, is there. He's visited. I think he's going to visit Miami. But when they bring in Rashad Amos from Miami of Ohio, that could be another back. And just like in Oklahoma, I think you're going to see kind of a rotation. Maybe someone gets a hot hand, but I really liked it. Defensively, Stone Blanton, transfer from South Carolina. He's going to be integral in this defense because it's a 3-4, kind of going away from the 3-3-5 that the Bulldogs have been running in Starkville the last 4 years. The good thing about Stone Blanton is Stone can play Mike or Will linebacker. So that's going to kind of help in that play. I tell you, Brandon Jennings was causing havoc all throughout the spring game. off the edge. He's one of those SEC edges that you see, and you're like, yeah, that Montez Sweat, those guys really doing a good job. DeMonte and DeMar Russell, brothers, combined for a sack. How great was that? You're playing with your brother, and you get a sack together. Gotta love it. It'll be interesting what happens in Starkville this year with Jeff Levy. It's his first year. Everywhere he's been, the offense is gone. Now, the DC, Mr. Coach Holtzler, he's got a tall task ahead of him, because he's replacing Nathaniel, Buki Watson, and Jeff Johnson, two guys that were like the heart and soul for the Mississippi State defense. Got to have some people step up in that, but Showtime State is now in Stark Vegas. But it was a lot of fun to watch that game, though. I know locally here, Cole Kublick was the guy who was calling the game. He worked for the SEC Network and did a really good job. Last week was the Georgia spring game. Georgia, of course, coming in. They're favored to be in the college football playoff under this new format. Carson Beck. You don't have Brock Bowers, Ladd McConkey, guys like that. But I was looking to talk to somebody about Georgia football. And I was doing some searching, and I came across J.C. Shelton. And I'm glad I did. Georgia fans out there, if you want your news about Georgia, follow this guy. You'll see his Twitter handle, everything like that. I start by talking to him about Brock Bowers. But here's that interview I taped with J.C. Shelton of Georgia Football Live. Brock Bowers is gone. He's going to be early on the first day taken. How does Georgia go about replacing that kind of production? Is it a receiver by committee, or is there a specific guy that you're kind of looking for this year to kind of take that leadership role?
I think you can go a different, ways with this. I think there are a couple guys that really stand out to me. I'll get into that. But I think I want to start with what I spoke about with Aaron Murray last week. Do a podcast with former Georgia tight end Arthur Lynch, and him and Aaron are good buddies. That he was his quarterback, right, at Georgia. So it was great letting them catch up there on the show. But we also talked about, what Aaron saw from this offense. He covered it for SEC Network, the G-Day game. At one point, he was right beside Kirby Smart, evaluating this offense. And we kind of agreed on it's going to be by committee. You mentioned it there. It's going to be multiple players making up for that, because you're not going to make up for generational talent, right? It can happen. But is it going to be like that next year? I don't think so, man. I think you use these different weapons, which Georgia has done a really good job of stacking this wide receiver room. And when you look at it, it really reminds me of some of the early offenses that Aaron Murray was a part of in Mike Bobo's offense, with a bunch of future NFL guys that really tore up the stat sheet, and can be that either, home run hitter, possession receiver, first down machine, whatever you want. They had that, right? And I think you have a lot of those aspects this year. And we'll start with maybe the number one option, and he's the number one option until I'm proven otherwise. I think we saw it a lot last year. I think we saw it especially in that spring game. I mean, he had the most targets from any receiver, even though he's the number one starter and you don't get that many snaps in G-Day. He still got, right, those number one targets. I think a lot have to do that with the depth at QB for Georgia. It is a little lacking here with their early enrollee, Ryan Puglisi, going through a knee injury, and he'll be back for the fall. But Gunnar Stockton and Carson Beck took a lot of those reps. Georgia wanted those receivers out there because they knew they needed to build some comfortability with Bowers, Ladd McConkey, Marcus Rosemary, Jack Saint off to the NFL there. So Dominic Lovett is that guy. He's a first down machine. Yak, great after the catch. I mean, he's so quick. He's elusive. His route running has gotten a lot better since he's gotten to Georgia and learned this offense, learn where he wanted to be to give Carson Beck the best target, the best opportunity to get him the ball. And we saw that multiple times. It doesn't matter if it's deep. It doesn't matter if it's up and close in the red zone. We saw a really, I got a great clip of this. I was blessed to be in the right spot. But Dominic Lovett caught one right behind the defender off his back. And Carson Beck put it in a great spot. It was really the only spot he probably could have made the catch there, because the defender was all over him. And Dominic's not a tall guy. And we asked Dominic after the game, we were like, what went into that catch there? Was there anything different on that route? Was it something you had been working on in practice, catching it behind him like that? Because it was really a rare grab. And he just basically said, me and Carson, we're on it. We're on the same page. He knew that's where I probably could have gotten it if I was going to get it at all. And that's what I expected to do. So, they look at that as just another day in the office when we were like, oh my God, what just happened there? I think that really shows a lot of that comfortability. But you also look at Dylan Bell, and Dylan Bell is just an athletic freak. He played running back for Georgia when Georgia underwent some injuries there in the backfield and lost a couple of starters and Kendall Milton and Dejon Edwards here and there. And Dylan Bell stepped right in, looked like he belonged there, which is really impressive when you think about playing one position, focusing on one position, taking all the reps there. All of a sudden, you're in the SEC and SEC play, and Georgia's like, "Hey, we need you to play running back." And he not only did he play, he played really well. Scored multiple touchdowns. His yards per carry was really good there too. So that shows you a little bit about him and what he can do. Really smart kid as well. Took up the offense really quickly as a freshman, and now he's in his third year. So expect some big stuff from him. And then you have the one transfer. Dominic was one of them last year, but also Ra Thomas, much bigger guy. He's that more physical presence, but he's also quick. He can beat you with the speed as well. He makes defenders pay in one-on-ones. And you got some transfer guys as well. And you got Colby Young from Miami, huge body. I remember seeing him on the field, and I was like, my God, that's an NFL receiver. He could play tight end if he wanted to, but I don't think Georgia's going to use him that way. He might be in line a little bit, but I think he's more right now a red zone threat, kind of third down guy, right, until he learns the offense well enough to where he can be in the right place on first and second downs and then not have to worry about him trying to get up to speed there. But he is that threat. I mean, he caught a red zone touchdown, should have had another in the spring game as well. So I think you rely on those guys, and you add like a London Humphreys from Vanderbilt. He's a track guy, still has a lot of work to do in the offenses, and I can kind of say this, and for all those transfer guys, they're not going to play a lot until they understand, and Georgia can trust them to be in the right place and not to be misplaced, missed defenders, whether they're blocking or trying to be in the right spot in the zone on a third down that's really critical. And in those SEC games, it all comes down to third down. You got to keep moving the ball, right, or your defense is going to get worn out as well. So I think those guys, you add even, I know I'm going long-winded here, you add even the running backs there. And I spoke about ETN earlier. He showed a lot of good stuff as a receiver, not only as a running back. I think he is the RB1. I think he kind of proved that, but we'll see what happens in fall camp, of course. But I think he gets a lot of those snaps, and really the versatility he can provide from that standpoint adds a lot for Beck in this offense.
One of the big things you mentioned, that keeping the third downs, converting, keeping your defense off the field. How good can this offensive line be? I've heard a lot of early season reports, even in the spring, that this is possibly the Joe Moore award-winning front runners heading into next year.
Yeah, they've been in contention with it, and a lot of those guys in this group were in contention the last 2 years for that award. It seems like it just, for some reason, Michigan pulls that, but we saw what happened in the Orange Bowl a couple of years ago to that front. They just actually got decimated. I think when you play in this conference, and Kirby Smart understands this so well, and I think the best coaches in this conference understand that as well. And, you got Oklahoma and Texas coming in. That's a little advice for them as well, man. Focus on getting those big bodies in because it really pays off. And I think that's the reason Georgia has done well here. They understand what it takes to play in this conference, whether it's the run game or pass protection. Now, last year, I think they're so good in pass pro. They really are. And they have been for some time. Run protection and run blocking was a little bit maybe the area they can improve on. So I'm excited to see that this year. Can they improve in that direction? And I think what ETN provides there, that burst, right, that can only help them. But they got to get up into the second level. The very senior group, except at center and really left tackle. But you had a left tackle and a true freshman last year that played really well, or a redshirt freshman, I should say, that played really well at Ernest Green. He did get tore up a little bit by Alabama and Dallas Turner, which, I mean, he's going to be a top 10 pick most likely. So don't blame him too much for that, especially how young he is. But he's really improved, according to what we've been told, over this, really his third offseason. So I think he's going to be a guy to watch right there. That may be one of those links that Georgia might swap in some guys in to see what the best fit is. But you have Xavier Truss as a senior. He might move to right tackle. That's what we expect. Jared Wilson there at center, replacing CJ Van Pran. And it should be a more story than it is, really, because you have Cedric Van Pran, who was the anchor to those back-to-back title teams, also played last year, was so durable, played, almost 40 games. I think it was around 40 in his Georgia career. So you have Jared Wilson stepping in there, but by all accounts, from coaches, from practice reports, from watching him in G-Day, from his teammates really love him. They say he's more of an athlete than Cedric Van Pran. He's got a great body for a center, 6'3", 300, right where you want it to be. So I think you take his athleticism and you add the trap ability, the sliding ability for him, the getting out in screens and really putting it on those cornerbacks who are undersized to him. I think that's a great sign, right? So I think it's more about those right tackle, left tackle spots for Georgia. If there was anything that could go wrong or maybe be a little inconsistent there, that's what it could be. But like you said, I mean, you said it earlier, they're going to be one of the best in the country, if not the best.
Casey Shelton from Georgia Football Live joins me. We're talking Bulldog football. They had their G-Day game. Georgia has also been known for defense since Kirby's been there, really kind of moving forward. What did you see during that G-Day game that made you comfortable knowing it's going to be kind of the same style defense, the same type of expectation?
Yeah, I think one thing to note before we get into that as well is just how many players were missing. So Georgia's very cautious with injuries right now. I would assume most teams are right now. So if you have really anything ailing a bit to where there could be further damage, you want to hold those guys out. So there was several players from the defensive back room that were held out. You had a couple guys that were on the defensive front as well as offensively here and there on offensive line. So I think what we did see, though, was a lot from the young players who got more reps there. You had Smail Mondon out, who all SEC linebacker. He'll be back this year. He's dealing with a foot injury that really held him back last year as well. So they're just giving him as much time as possible. Could have went to the NFL draft, but I think that injury is the reason he's back. So expect a big year out of him. But with him out at the spring game, you saw a lot more C.J. Allen, Raylan Wilson, who really came on strong last year. And as other linebackers, Justin Williams, former 5-star, Chris Cole, former 5-star, those guys. And Georgia likes at linebacker there is really a guy who can cover both ends of the field. Speed is the key. And those guys are former track stars, right? But they filled out as they got into high school, 6'2", 6'3", around 220 or so. And that's what Georgia likes. They moved from that big backer back in the Kirby Smart Alabama days to this guy who can run both sides of the field and really cover in space. And that's what we saw really well. Really impressed with their coverage. I think the defensive front returns a lot of upperclassmen, some young guys in there as well. Georgia needs a havoc wreaker, really. And as Kirby Smart says, last year they were lacking a little bit in the run department, at least from Georgia standard. They led the country in back-to-back title seasons. And then last year they were like 16th in run defense, if I remember correctly. So that's what you want to see. You want to see some guys who really can take on double teams and be unmovable. So they have some young guys to watch for. Kristen Miller, I really like what he brings to the table. Tyrone Ingham-Dawkins, he was hurt, wasn't playing, but he'll be back as well. Jordan Hall is going into his second year after a true freshman campaign. Warren Brinson, Nazir Stackhouse. You need these guys to really step up their game and be more of a really matchup nightmare one-on-one with guys. And that's really what they weren't last year at times, especially against Alabama. And that's where you see it most in the postseason. And these offensive lines can really tee off and they're really pumped up and you got all that adrenaline rushing, right? Defensive back-wise, like I said, there were guys missing. But I really liked what we saw from KJ Bolden, the 5-star. He flipped from FSU, and Georgia really recruited him hard for a reason all throughout high school. I mean, he's that talented. I saw him a couple of times really cover a lot of space, like 15, 16 yards there from a free safety and really come up and tackle bigger guys, tight ends that are 240, and he didn't really give up an inch. So that's what you want to see from these young guys. Can they tackle in space against these bigger SEC players? And they're going to see a lot more of that next year, and it'll be more difficult. Really for those guys, as well as cornerback at Ellis Robinson, the 4th, really similar to KJ Bolden, how highly he was recruited, highest rated Kirby Smart recruited cornerback in that era. He's got a lot of expectations. I saw him up close in some one-on-one drills before the game as well as in the game. Really impressed me. I mean, that was his thing coming out of high school was man on man, right? So we'll have to understand this Georgia zone, and that's kind of the biggest thing for those guys. Again, just like on offense with the transfers. I mean, Georgia, they say if you don't play well in practice, you're not going to play. If we can't trust you, you're not going to play. So they're going to get some early snaps, and Kirby Smart in that defensive coordinator room as well. They're going to really push those guys to play early and try to get some snaps in to where if injuries happen or maybe they play well enough to get a bigger role that they can do it and be trusted. So I think those are some guys to watch. Dalen Everett returns as a starter at cornerback. And we know what Malachi Starks brings. He was out with a shoulder injury, right? So he didn't play. And that's really a good thing. You want to keep that guy healthy as possible because he's probably going to be a first-round pick. He's probably going to have another All-American season if he can get back healthy. So you know what he brings to the table. And then another safety I'll throw out that people aren't talking about as much, but played really well and knows the defense better than any player on that defense, Malachi Starks included, is Dan Jackson. He's a super senior. He's a former walk-on, so he's a great story, right? I find myself wanting him to succeed all the time. He's a great kid and knows that defense really, really well. So he's a headhunter. He's an absolute headhunter. So I think he brings a more of a physical presence as well as a leadership guy in that back end.
Got to ask you about Kirby Smart. What makes Kirby different? Because Georgia's had success with Mark Richt, but what made Kirby different to kind of push Georgia football over that threshold to being what they've become now?
Yeah, I've asked that questions a lot of the former Mark Richt players. And the first and foremost, all they do really to start is say how good of a man he is and how much he developed them as men, as grown men. And, they come in as 18, 19, sometimes 17-year-old kids into a new spot, maybe sometimes far from home, right? And, he kind of takes that leadership role almost as a father figure for them, Mark Richt does. And, that's really what they start with, and they can't thank him enough for that part as well. And they also say he was fiery too. I mean, he's competitive as hell. All right, those players tell me. But you can see that with Kirby, you might think, okay, he's way more competitive than Mark. That's not the case, really. But what they did say was the way that Kirby Smart can get these guys riled up for maybe things within themselves, not use just a specific pregame. Of course, you want to be fired up pregame, but all throughout the week, they practice. Right, the practices are harder than their games, and that's what we keep hearing from players all throughout Kirby Smart's career. Kirby Smart says it too in his press conferences. He wants these practices to be way harder than the games. So when you get to the games, it's not that bad, right? Players that talk about, game day, yeah, it's tough. You run a lot, right? You're exhausted, but it's not like practices. So I think that's one area we can point to as well. I think another area is recruiting. And, Aaron told me, he asked Mike Bobo the other week, why it seemed like we had a lot of big guys on offensive line, defensive line when I was there, but it looks like these guys are just different. And Mike Bobo said, well, basically, when we were with Mark Richt, he would recruit, and as most coaches do really still, they would recruit guys to get them bigger with the weight program. So he is this size now, well, we can add weight. Well, Kirby Smart does the opposite, really, especially on the offensive, defensive lines, is, they recruit guys way over what they want them to be weight-wise, and they'll bring them down. And for a really good example of that this year is an early enrollee offensive lineman in Nair Daniels, came in at 6'8", 396, is what Kirby said in his press conference. And, of course, the reporter asked him, what's he at now? I know you guys want to get him down to play offensive line because you don't want an offensive lineman that big. You can't move that very well, right? Well, he said he's gotten down 45 to 50 pounds almost already, and that's just within a spring. So I think that's one area you can point to as well. And Kirby and the NFL draft success and stuff like that, I think that's even a huge recruiting pitch. Mark Richt and those classes, a lot of them were top 10, right? But they were not as consistent as 4 number ones in 8 years now for Kirby Smart.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of that is the NFL draft development that they see every spring, and we're about to see it tomorrow, or not tomorrow, but Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. I mean, that's an easy recruiting pitch is, look, this guy's a 3-star. Like Javon Bullard might be one of the first safeties taken. He probably top 2 safety taken. He's a former 3-star, right? Jordan Davis, former 3-star.
Yeah.
Stetson Bennett was a walk-on. Dan Jackson, who I just mentioned, was a walk-on. Several linebackers in that group, like a Tay Crowder, who's had good NFL success. He was a 3-star running back. So I think he shows that he'll put you in the best position to play in the pros. First off, if you're not in the right position when you come in or you haven't played it, he knows what to do there. And also that's the program he puts you through in the practices, not just the games. It really develops you, and you have to have more of a team mindset to play for him as well. And NFL teams absolutely love that because you're playing with guys who have, families, grown kids, right? And they play for them as well. You come into that group with more of a me mentality, and it's not going to go well.
You talk about the draft. Obviously, Georgia puts a lot of people in the NFL and makes it very enticing for young men to come play for Kirby Smart. A lot of talk about this year's draft is about this generational talent we talked about at tight end, Brock Bowers. Obviously, tight ends are all the craze in the NFL now. George Kittle, Travis Kelce, Pitts, all these guys. Where do you think he'll go, and what do you think is the best fit for Brock Bowers?
Yeah, I'm pretty prepared for this. I did a deep dive yesterday on this question because it's really been bugging me, honestly. And I think if you're a college football fan in general, you know this as well, but especially if you're a Georgia fan, Georgia faithful, and watching this guy for 3 years come in as a true freshman and be the best player on the field, against some future NFL first round draft picks
Right.
and with them, playing with them as well. It's a little odd, right? First off, if you don't dig deep into it, it's like, why is this guy not a top 5 NFL pick? Because you can make a case he's the best player in the draft because of his versatility. That is one of the keys. I mean, of course, we see his yak, yards after the catch. He's going to get you sometimes 15 yards and break 3 tackles. Will he do that in NFL as much? Maybe not. No, those are the top 1%ers. But he's going to break some tackles. He's going to get you yards after the catch. He's got really sure hands, speed. He's taken 80-yard touchdowns as a ball carrier.
Yeah.
And as well as slants to the house. The safeties and corners, they don't know how to line him up and take good angles because he just gets to another gear. So it's like, why is he not a top 5 pick? Well, what I've found, and look for this as well on Thursday, because he'll go on Thursday, but is how deep this draft is at quarterback at the top. Receivers, especially, offensive tackles and edge defenders, those are going to take up the top 10 because those are more priority positions in NFL football. And you got to pay those guys, right? Tight end, you don't have to that much because you can look at the best tight end. They're making half of what the best receiver is, so you can know you don't have to pay him that much anyway. So I think, and that just shows you how much priority these receivers are. And you got like guys like Marvin Harrison, and you can name 5 or 6 right now that are really, really good. And then quarterbacks, of course, we mentioned a couple of them earlier. I think that's the main reason I came away with is like, people have them on the draft boards. We'll talk about, really my industry favorites there is Mel Kiper, Jordan Reed and Field Yates and those guys. I love what they do and how hard they work on this and evaluating and speaking to sources and such on teams and trying to get us the best blueprint. But, they have them, the earliest I've seen is to the Jets at number 10. And I've also seen some Broncos and then Chargers as well. I think for me, it's hard to say that the Jets wouldn't be a great fit because you have a really good defense already. You have a future Hall of Famer at quarterback I know his Achilles ain't 100% right now, but that arm sure looked good when he had opportunities in the last few years as well to show that. And then you also have a really great receiver to take some of that heat off of you and Garrett Wilson. They pull 2 offensive tackles from the free agency. I know they're older, but they were really established guys as well, and they needed some protection. So I think it makes sense for them to add a weapon for Aaron who can do everything. You can line him in line. He can block well enough. Is he going to block like, your 6'6", 270 guys? No. Right. But he does it well enough, I think, to play in that position as well as blocking on the outside. He's really good at that against those cornerbacks and safeties, nickels, whatever you want to put him up against. But also he can work off the end arounds in a ball carrier. He had 5 rushing touchdowns in his college career. And he can also play outside as a receiver because he has deceptive speed. He knows where to sit in the zone to give you the best position, and he opens his body up so well as a target. And he's a good 6'4", 245. So I think he provides so much skill set and value there that it's hard for me to not see them taking him. And I've seen to where they say, well, the Jets might take an offensive tackle. Why wouldn't that be a next year thing if you add 2 free agents in, right? I mean, I know they're getting older. Why not add him and take a generational talent like Bowers and see what you can do?
All right, 2 final questions for me. J.C. Shelton from Georgia Football Live, executive editor of the Players Lounge. Sports Bites is about food. Where and what has been the best thing you've eaten at a tailgate?
Yeah, so I'm going to go Tennessee and Neyland Stadium, right outside Neyland Stadium. And if you have some volunteer football fans on here, they got to tell me because I cannot remember the name of it. It was a busy day, as you might imagine, up there with 100,000 plus walking around there as well. But we stopped at a barbecue place. Brisket is my favorite. I'm a mac and cheese guy as well. Give me some mac and cheese and green beans. I feel like mac and green beans go together so well.
Too, huh?
Huh?
Get you a meeting too.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I'm a big boy. I don't know if I don't look at it on this camera, but yeah, I got to eat, man. I got to eat a lot. So especially you had a carb load for how much excitement you're about to go through, and especially that rowdy Tennessee atmosphere. So that's my go-to.
It's up there. Last question. We talked about the portal. Now there's news swirling around Georgia and possibly getting a big-name quarterback and Rashada being from Arizona State. Have you heard anything about his visit? Anything like that?
Yeah. So we don't have information on how the visit is going because it's currently just started today. TPL Georgia, the Players Lounge Georgia, we reported that yesterday, I believe, or might be the night before. if memory serves, and we reported he is on a visit Tuesday the 23rd through Thursday the 25th.
Okay.
So it's hard for me. I'll first off say it's hard for me to imagine that he wouldn't play for Georgia if both sides come away from this visit interested still. I think Georgia even bringing him in is a really good sign, because I think in the winter portal, only one player that visited didn't end up signing with Georgia, and that was Holden Stace, who ended up going to tight end. To Tennessee, sorry, tight end from Notre Dame. So I think that's a really good sign if you're considering whether this is going to happen or not. I think from his standpoint, and I've seen this take as well, and I think it's more of an unpopular opinion, but I get why it was said. And I saw it on Twitter from more of a prominent writer as well. It basically went, Dylan Rashada doesn't really add anything to this room. He'll be a horrible fit. It's more of a bag mentality NIL wise. And I see why you say that in today's era, but Georgia's different. Georgia does not offer as much NIL money. Georgia's about development. So I think him even considering it is a good sign for those in that camp, because you're going to come here. He knows it's going to be a backup, and I think you want to develop. You want to take that time to develop. So if he has that mentality of developing and knowing he's going to sit behind somebody to at least the next window where he can maybe go contribute somewhere else. If he doesn't show enough in this next year, if he signs with Georgia to maybe garner a top spot next year, I think that's a good sign from his mentality. And watching him, he has a skill set. He has a big arm. I like to see his legs a little bit more, but who knows? It's probably an absolute monumental defense. Change from where he played last year in that offense to what he would have at Georgia, right? So I think it's almost unfair to evaluate that with a lot of standing to where he's come from. But again, the mentality for me, I think that's a good sign, and we'll see what happens. Maybe we'll have some news here on Friday. Georgia loves to release stuff when people get off work on Friday.
makes dog fans happy to head into the weekend. But we had an Arizona State quarterback that left. His teammates were, we've all seen the video. The teammates saying he was sorry, no good. Came to the SEC and ended up winning a Heisman Trophy. And I think he kind of made a big point there talking about Georgia not being as freewheeling with the NIL money for those who automatically now, because it's the easy place to go. He's just chasing the money. Well, maybe he's chasing future money because of the development, because of working with Mike Bobo, working with that type of team. You go to the SEC, the SEC, especially now with the addition of Oklahoma, but even before Oklahoma and Texas, way better than the Big 12. You go into as a quarterback and you start tearing up the SEC, you're going to get the money.
Yeah, and I think another thing I'll add before we get off is, the pro offense that Georgia runs is more like an NFL system than these other places. Yep. It's not a Tennessee, right? It's not a Florida. It's some of these places, and you look at, not to hate on Tennessee too much, but there's a reason that those quarterbacks don't go as high. It's a very QB-friendly system. They only run a few routes. The hurry-up thing, it doesn't. Unless you're going 2-minute drill, it's not what you're going to do in the NFL 80% of the time. So teams want to see that, and what Georgia runs there is that style. They do a lot of things that the NFL does, especially in shifts and motions, and then the route trees are really expanded, right? And they expect you to not only catch passes but also block really well, and that's a major thing for Georgia. Yep. And even if, let's say, something doesn't work out for you in the league and what have you, you're a receiver, you're going to be asked to block on special teams a lot. So I think the offensive that Georgia runs would also be a great fit when you're talking future money, which I don't think anybody should have a problem with.
Absolutely not. JC, tell everybody how they can follow your stuff, your content, how they can see you.
Yeah, best is on Twitter. All my stuff's on Twitter. It's an easy find there, JC Shelton _. Also, we have Words for the Players Lounge every day. We got some great exclusive interviews we actually just had Tennessee basketball's new women's coach. We have major players. We had Charlie Condon, Georgia baseball, and Georgia football players each week as well. So if you're Georgia, Clemson, Tennessee fan, that's a great place to be. But also UGA Football Live with JC Shelton is my podcast. Former Georgia tight end Arthur Lynch on almost every week now. During the season, we'll have a couple episodes a week. But we have former Georgia players on, current Georgia players. Really anybody who knows some good stuff to give us some good conversations. So you can find that on YouTube at the Pulse Sports Network or wherever we'll get you listening to your podcast. So I appreciate you having me on, Chris.
No problem. I'm looking forward to it. I'm excited being a Sooner ready for us to come into the SEC, especially after what I saw from the spring game. Going to be a lot of fun, but we'll have to get back together before the season kicks off.
Absolutely. Just let me know.
All
Take
right,
care.
JC, I appreciate it, man. That's JC Shelton. That was JC Shelton of the Georgia Football Live. Really great insight. Guys, if you are a Georgia fan, go check his stuff out. He's got an interview with Hines Ward, and it's good stuff. I mean, I'm trying to get those kind of connections, right? To where you're in there talking to Hines Ward, a Georgia great, Super Bowl champion. Of course, it doesn't hurt when you got Aaron Murray as one of your co-hosts either. But that's the interview that I did, kind of talking about Georgia. We're reaching out. We're going to get some guys on. I actually have tomorrow, I'm going to be interviewing the voice of the Oklahoma Sooners, Toby Rowland, and I will have that on next week's show. But Toby, a good friend of mine, like I said, I worked with him for a long time, and get his thoughts on what he saw on the spring game. Maybe talk a little bit of OU baseball, because they're rolling through the Big 12 in their final season, heading towards the SEC, which is going to be a lot different when you go into the baseball world. But speaking of Oklahoma, I had a chance to sit down and watch the spring game. Now, I'll say this. I've known Toby. Toby was on the call. I got to watch, and then also Dusty Dvorak. And I love Dusty. I got to know Dusty really well when he started working at the radio station. Actually started on the show with me. And, of course, he's built that into a huge career. But he committed a broadcaster faux pas in the game. A hot mic, saying something probably should not have said over a hot mic. Now, there was no foul language. I feel bad, because I heard it. When you go back and watch the replay of the game, you can hear it. And there was a play when Oklahoma scored, or the offensive team scored, because Oklahoma was Oklahoma. And he was talking about and I'm not going to say who, people who know that say, I bet you so-and-so just totally screwed that up. And I was like, whew, okay. Then he kind of paused and said, he opened the wrong way. And then there's another pause, and then the comment, I don't think they can play him. That's from a guy who played defense at the highest level, played for the Bears, really good defensive player. I felt it's one of those, like, when I see an inadvertent whistle or something in a football game, being that I officiated, that sucks when that happens. Okay. It's terrible to have an open mic, especially when you're doing a spring game for your alma mater. I'm sure he heard it, but get into talking about the OU spring game. It's a different season now. This is the first time. I want to say, if you're watching the screen, you can see right there a nod, a little homage to Toby Keith, who was a huge OU fan, great person in the city of Norman, and what he did for the program, what he did for the high schools there, because you have two, you got Norman High and Norman North, did such a great job, and just an outstanding human being. But them paying homage, especially because I think it was 94, 95, they used to let celebrities and former players just play in the spring game. Toby Keith, who was opening for Brooks and Dunn at that time, breaks his ankle. We had to postpone a couple of shows, but I think that kind of ended that. But going into this spring game, there was a lot of talk. Obviously, the way last year ended, you lost to Arizona, you lose to Kansas, and Jackson Arnold, a very up and down, hot and cold bowl game for him. The defense was being talked about again, of course, in the offseason. Ted Roof was let go. Zach Alley being brought in. Talk a little bit about the offensive side of the ball first. Jackson Arnold to Deion Burks is going to be a lot of fun to watch. Now, again, I don't want to get too excited about it, because you saw Arch Manning have big days. You saw the Mississippi State quarterbacks have big days, receivers running free. And the Oklahoma team had Billy Bowman, Woody Washington out. just some of the guys in the back that, a little more of that leadership that have been on the field. And for some of these guys, it's game situations. So I'm not going to get too far ahead of myself on, being, oh my God, Jackson Arnold and Deion Burks. Deion Burks is the real deal, though. He showed the speed, he showed the route running. And in that game, you had a freshman All-American, Nick Anderson, not playing. You had who else wasn't playing? Goodness gracious. Jaleel Farouk wasn't playing. So, I mean, it's three of the wide receivers were not really there that I was expecting to see. So, in that, you kind of knew some of the focus was going to be on Deion Burks, and he showed it. He showed it. Jackson Arnold. Now, the offense, it was up and down for the again, one of those weird games. The offense scores like 3 possessions in a row, and you're like, oh my goodness, here we go. It's the same kind of defense at Oklahoma. It's the same kind of defense at Oklahoma. The defense, and it's one of those modifying, and to tell you how serious they take it. All right, it's more about reps. In this game, they brought a guy out from the stands to do the kicking for chicken, which they always did. You make the field goal, you get free chicken for a year. And I can't remember what facility, what restaurant it was in, but they bring a guy out for the kicking for chicken. And if he makes the field goal, it would credit the offense 3 points. If he misses the field goals, it gives the defense 4 points. Also, at the beginning of the fourth quarter, they had a coach's punting competition, and whatever side had the best punt, they got it. So again, trying to have some fun, but to get some work in. So that's why I try not to get like, let's give him the Heisman, let's go right now, or really hard on some people. Because Texas gave up some big plays, Mississippi State's defense gave up some big plays, and watching this, so did Oklahoma's. Michael Hawkins Jr. came in, and he's a legacy from Texas. His dad played, and he showed a lot of potential of what he has. The arm talent, the speed. The offensive line at that time was kind of patchwork. 8 sacks on the day by the defensive side of the ball. There was a lot of times that Michael Hawkins was kind of running for his life. And, the running game, I'm okay with the running games. I'm okay with it. Now, I'm here, Javonte Barnes may hit the transfer portal. And, with the way the running back room is, because I like what I saw from Gavin Sawchuk, Caleb Hicks, Sam Franklin. And for Oklahoma fans, Sam Franklin, the transfer from UT Martin, reminds me a lot of Quentin Griffin. All right. Very small, can kind of hide in that line, pop out, zone blocks, whatever. Now they're showing the kick. Field goal kicking is the bane of all Oklahoma fans' existence. It reminds me of almost like Alabama before they got Reichert. Such a good football team, such a terrible kicker. But we'll see. It's spring. We'll see moving forward. But I like Sam Franklin with what he did. Caleb Hicks looked really, really good. General Booty, of course, everybody had a good time. Booty scored. You got to hear General Booty's name called. But overall, impressed. I came out of it knowing Oklahoma is going to have to go shopping in the transfer portal for some offensive linemen. And they did that with Hickman from SMU. Great center, 300-pound, 6'3" center. Only gave up 1 sack, I believe, and over 1,100 pass blocking attempts. Yeah, you like that. You like that. You bring it up, and Tyler Guyton's gone. He could be going in the first round, and we'll see what happens with the NFL draft there. But defensively, again, this is Zach Alley's defense, and a lot of people talk about that Zach Alley. That hit right there. I'm going to talk about that gentleman. But Zach Alley comes in. He was a staffer under Venables at Clemson. And a lot of the guys that have been here at the program since Venables has been here have come out and said that this guy is a carbon copy of younger Venables. Now, I remember when Venables got to Oklahoma in the late 90s, early 2000s. He's just a ball of energy all over the place. Loved it. He slowed down a little bit, but he's still pretty amped up. But the defense, Danny Stutzman, I think, continues to show why he's one of the best linebackers in the country. Now you're going to have opportunity to do it in the SEC. And if you can have a big year in the SEC, That's really going to help pull forward. Like I said, Billy Bowman didn't play. Woody Washington didn't play. But you did see a lot of good things from the defense. You saw some of the young guys, David Stone, Jalen Jackson. Those are the guys that were teammates at IMG. David Stone's going to be a pro. And Jaden Jackson, just to hear his story, it's awesome. I love it. But I love what I'm seeing from the team, because I'll say this. You don't want to get hurt. You don't want to hurt anybody, but Michael Boganowski, great name. Boganowski made some hits. He had no regards for his teammates or anything like that. He didn't care. He was bringing it. And it's been a long time since Oklahoma has had guys that could bring it. Kobe McKenzie, he was laying the thump. I was happy about it. So I leave spring practice for Oklahoma cautiously optimistic. Now, I'll say this, and this will probably piss a lot of Oklahoma fans off. As I sit there and try to do a job, not as a fan, but as a journalist, and looking at where Oklahoma is and where they're going to go. All right. Now, I'll say this too. I think there's a chip on Oklahoma's shoulder heading into the SEC. A lot of people with the, you're not ready. And Oklahoma's like, well, we're going to show you. I mean, it's a blue blood program. We'll see. But it's different. I want a cautiously optimistic, looking at the schedule as I try to write it down and be objective. I still have a 7-8 win season. I truly hope that I'm wrong. I truly hope that Oklahoma goes out there and takes it to the SEC. It's a different ball game. Tennessee is going to be good. You got to go to Oxford. Ole Miss probably going to be the best team Lane Kiffin's ever had this year. Jackson Dart, those guys. You got Bama coming in. South Carolina is tough, always tough. Missouri, I ain't going to talk about Missouri. And you got to go to Death Valley. You got to go to the Tigers. Oh, my God. You got to deal with LSU. It'll probably be a night game. Finally, yeah. I hope to go out there and make the college football playoff. It's going to be hard. And I tell people, Auburn may not be that, quote, good of a football team, but that is an extremely difficult place to play. They come. Every game, they're there. The guys are dressed up. The girls are dressed up. They're there. They're ready to roll Toomer's Corner, so get ready. It's going to be a lot of fun. But I liked what I saw from the spring game. No real glaring, like, oh, my God, they got to fix this. I like what I saw. I'm confident in Jackson Arnold, and I think everything is going to be all right out there. Well, now it's time for my give them a Sixer 6 picks. Now, I talked a little bit about this. And last time I was on, I did the top 6 professional football uniforms, home uniforms. This is my top 6 college uniforms, period. It's not a home, it's just the look. And my give them a Sixers 6 picks.
Here's the snap. Look, swing play to Payne. He's looking to the 10, cuts outside. 5. Touchdown. Give him a Sixer, Brian Peyton Gavris looking for a pass down the far side. Caught. Touchdown. Corbin Cleveland. Give him a Sixer.
It is time for my give them a 6 or 6 picks. Everyone's got a top 10. They got a top 5. I've got a top 6. As you heard from the call right there, that was my touchdown call when I was doing play-by-play. Give them a Sixer. Student section really loved it. Everybody loved it out there. But there's no prerequisites for this list. This is my opinion. Feel free to comment in the chat if you think I got something wrong. If you don't like it, it's okay. We can engage. We can talk. Be sure you like, follow, subscribe. Click that bell on YouTube so you can be alerted when I drop cooking videos, food reviews, recruiting updates, stuff like that. Just follow all the socials, helping this grow. Now, my honorable mention, and again, like I said, with this, I didn't have any prerequisites. I wasn't sitting there saying this is what, I'll say this much. Oregon's not on there. Sorry. Oregon, Oklahoma State, those teams that have 700 combinations, you're not on there. But my honorable mention, the Air Force Academy. Now, I just wrote an article on Coach Calhoun signing an extension through the 2029 season. You can catch that on Yard Barker. You can catch it on collegefootballdogs.com, on all my socials. That'll should be publishing pretty soon. Now, again, honorable mention. I love I'm a Navy. I was in the Navy, but I love the Air Force uniform. The blue and white, a great look. The bolt, it's fantastic. It's every year, to me, one of the best. Vandy Chris saying, don't mention the Air Force. Hunter will ride. Well, he can ride. I'm a Navy guy. And saying that I think the Air Force is my honorable mention top 6 uniform in the country. Now, if he doesn't like that, he might like this at number 6. If he's listening, he knows. My number 16, top college football uniforms of all time. The men of Troy. It's iconic. I may not be a fan of the team. It's an iconic look. You see that helmet, you know who it is. That color combination when they come out, you know who it is. It's classic. They don't change a lot. They've had chrome face masks. They do some stuff every now and then. But even the road with the white jerseys and the gold, like it's I'm not a USC fan. But as far as Uniswag goes, it's pretty salty. Pretty salty. The men of Troy. Maybe Hunter heard that one, right? Now, my number 5 team. This may upset some people. That's right, Boomer Sooner, baby. It is an iconic helmet. It is an iconic look. The interlocking O and U, the crimson. I still think the white road uniforms are one of the best uniforms of all time, especially now that the helmets have gone to kind of that red chrome. I love it. But when you see that jersey, that helmet, you see those, it's, you know what it is. Alabama and Oklahoma, very similar. I just, the interlocking O and U. And of course, it's a classic look, man. And again, the whites, I love the whites. The road whites are just crispy clean. Gotta love them. Now, on number 14. Everybody knows who number 4 is just by the playing song. Now, this is not the song that you always hear when they're playing, but it is their fight song. Seminoles. Again, it's iconic. It's classic. There's a lot of red in my top 6. But the spear on the helmet, the gold helmet, I love the look. You know, I know they've tried to do, and I'm not going to get an alternate where they wore the black. Now, the all whites with the white helmets and stuff, I thought were really, really good. I thought they were really, really good. But that's my number 14 as far as top uniforms in college football history. Florida State Seminoles. Now, who's going to be my number 3? Can you name this team? It's a song I got sick of hearing at the Cotton Bowl. It's annoying, just as annoying as Boomer Sooner can be to some other fans. But again, you talk about classic, iconic uniforms. The burnt orange. They're all white. They're pretty crisp and clean as well. That logo, you know what it is. You see that, you know it's the Texas Longhorns, one of the storied programs in all of college football. It's a great look. Even though I hate the team, but you know who it is. You know exactly who it is. They don't have to change it that much. I mean, they go watch my buddy Tom Helmer on Hooked on Helmets. He'll tell you the whole lineage, the whole history of what's going on. That's my number 3. Texas Fight. Oh, I got tired of hearing that song. Now, I wanted to find a certain song to play for number 2. I was concerned I couldn't find it because sometimes when it's played, there's a little bit of foul language. But my number 2 team, for those of you in the SEC, I think you understand who's number 2 for me. LSU, the Bayou Bengals come in at number 2 for me. I love that they're one of those teams that wears the white jerseys at home. When they did the all whites, it's a clean look. Again, I'm not getting into, over the throwbacks, anything like that. Just overall, you know who that is. Van and Chris says Notre Dame, Penn State, Michigan fighting over the top 2. You just have to wait and see. But to me, LSU is the number 2 uniform, especially there with the tiger eye swirl at the stadium, the band playing neck. They've been well lubricated all game, all day. It's my number 2. Number 1 team. As Van and Chris said, he listed 3 teams: Notre Dame, Penn State, and Michigan. My number 1, and again, this is just my opinion. Everybody is entitled to theirs, what they think. But my number 1 team, and I was never a fan of the team, just always liked the uniform. And I always like seeing when other schools with different color schemes would wear this kind of uniform. Hail to the victory. The winged helmet. Now, I know, Hunter, if you're listening, you're going to say it's the same as Delaware. The Michigan Wolverines, to me, it's number 1. Number 1 football uniform in college football. Notre Dame, I can't choose Notre Dame, and I'm going to tell you why, Vandy Chris. I have no feelings, good or bad, towards Notre Dame. But if I pick Notre Dame, then I've got to pick Navy. I've got to pick Army. I can't. And Penn State, they're white. I know. Vandy Chris is a fun story. Delaware wore it first. That's right. You're absolutely right. Delaware, the Blue Hens wore that the winged helmet before the University of Michigan. Absolutely right on that. Again, if you watch Tom Helmer from Hooked on Helmets, he'll break down the whole lineage. But I get a lot of people are going to say Nebraska or Notre Dame. They're going to say Penn State. Penn State never really changes, and that's not. Again, there was no pre-work. I took out some of those things because you don't have any history to bond to. Like, I wish Oregon would have stayed with what Oregon had. Their UO and the duck, and stick with that. But Notre Dame, I can't, because them and Navy looked so familiar for so long. The gold. And then what they started doing with some of their Shamrock series. Yeah, Holy Cross is one of college. Yep, absolutely. But I mean, there was a team back in Oklahoma in high school called Lawton Well, Lawton High Wolverines. James Thrash, he played there. Well, Brewer, some guy. They were the Wolverines. The Lawton Wolverines were red and black, and they had a red helmet, and you had to earn the wings that were black. And I just thought that was a sick look. Absolutely sick look. But that's my 6 picks. My give them a 6 or 6 picks of top college football uniforms in the country. Guys, that's going to wrap it up for me tonight. I think everybody that jumped in the comments, everybody that watched, again, we're growing this thing. If you hadn't heard, I want to say thank you to leadership at the College Football Dogs for believing in me. I got some articles out this week. Again, all my socials, you go check them out. I did a OU spring game recap. I did a Mississippi State spring game recap. Did a breaking news article about some of the new technology rules that are now out in college football, the helmet communications. And some people think that's going to be just an easy fix. It's not. I mean, there's going to be some problems, some bugs to work out. We'll see. We'll see. But also, and now I'm waiting for it to publish, I have an article about Troy Calhoun, the Air Force coach, who has a chance to get past Fisher DeBerry, who was his coach, as the most wins. He has a higher winning percentage right now. Hasn't played as many games. He's still about 30 games away, I think, from breaking Fisher DeBerry's wins record. Of course, Fisher DeBerry, such a great coach at the Air Force Academy. I always tell this story before I get off here. So my old partner, Teddy Lehman, Butkus Award winner, All-American at Oklahoma, great linebacker, great college football player. I feel he should be in the College Football Hall of Fame. He meets all the requirements. We'll see when it happens. I think he should be in there. One show we were doing, we're talking about tough games, and I asked Teddy, I said, who is the toughest non-conference opponent that you faced that people wouldn't believe? And Teddy didn't hesitate when he said Air Force. Because it was the year after the national championship, and they go, Oklahoma went to Colorado Springs to play at the academy. So you're up in elevation. And I've told this story before on the show. I know I have. But he didn't hesitate. He said Air Force. And I kind of looked dumbfounded. He said, yeah. He said, they're fundamental. They don't stop. They're hard-nosed. They know how to block. You know, of course, running that option, they're chopping. And still being an Oklahoma guy, I still love watching option football. Option football is still some of the best out there. And then, of course, Air Force now with the Bolt and stuff like that. But congratulations to Coach Calhoun. He's been extended through the 2029 season. So he's going into his 18th year. Fisher DeBerry coached 22 years at the Air Force Academy. And, of course, he coached Calhoun. That was on that 12-1 team back in 85. That went 12-1, I believe. And that was the year that Fisher DeBerry won Coach of the Year, taking the Air Force Falcons to a 12-1. I think they finished number 13 in the polls at that time, but a good year for the Air Force Falcons. But again, everybody that hopped in the comments, man, thank you. For those that are following now, please subscribe. Click that little bell on YouTube so you know when I post any kind of videos, my shorts, food reviews, cooking demos, stuff, all that stuff that I do. When I, because obviously, the interviews I do at games, you saw that with the Horsemen tonight. But you see all the socials right there on Twitter or X at Sports Bites Pod 1. On TikTok, you can follow me at Sports Bites Pod. I usually do a poll question of the day. I did have I did want to say this before I get out of here too. Okay, so you see YouTube at Sports Bites Podcast, and you see on Instagram Sports Bites Podcast as well. The last post I made on TikTok, and I can speak on this because I'm diabetic myself. But I saw a claim come out that some scouts were making about A.D. Mitchell, who played wide receiver at Georgia, played wide receiver at Texas. But there's a report coming out that A.D. Mitchell is practically uncoachable because he's not taking care of himself and his diabetes diagnosis. Now, for me as somebody who is type 1 diabetic. And some of the stuff that they tried to explain about when he's not in control, it's combative, doesn't pay attention, irritable stuff. All that stuff is true. It's stuff that I experienced when I really wasn't taking control or taking care of my diabetes treatment. I'm on pump therapy now. It's been game changing. My wife's a nurse. I hear all these stories about people that are suffering and possibly going to have their foot amputated and they're still slamming Cokes. It took me a while and we worked through it. I mean, there was times when people are like, little things that never bother you are bothering you now, what's going on. And the more I read, the more I found stuff out that diabetes will really affect, if it's out of control for a while, will really affect your central nervous system, how you speak. And I thank my former boss, God rest his soul, is no longer with us, Randy LaFoon, who called me to his office one day and said, hey, you need to go to the doctor because we're hearing you slur your words on air. We know you're not drinking. We know you're not doing that. Go check. Come to find out, I had diabetes. I'm glad he told me. I miss Randy all the time. Great guy, great father, great boss. But Randy LaFoon was one of the best and saved my life. And I went through that time of denial of like, I mean, whatever I want, I don't care. I can't do it. And so I was hoping that it wasn't true. So I asked around. I talked to some people that have been around AD Mitchell, Texas, and Georgia. Very high profile, very, very high profile schools. Nobody knows what the hell they're talking about. That scout, whoever it is, it's probably one of those ploys out there before the draft. You start saying some crazy shit to get people to fall in it. I don't know. AD Mitchell has a chance to be a phenomenal receiver in the NFL. Who knows if he's going to? I hope he's taking care of his diabetes. Now, that was the first time I had heard about it. Now, I know Mark Andrews talked a lot about it when he was at Oklahoma. He talks about it in the NFL because he's a type 1 diabetic. You see him on the sidelines doing his checks. But that's just, you hear that stuff. And it's always around draft time stuff comes out. But especially when it's stuff like this, I thought that'd be kind of like a HIPAA violation, letting health information out unless it was public. I don't know. But I started hearing it and it really rung home because when I was not controlling my sugars, that's what it turned out to be. So I hope he's taking care of himself. I hope he's taking it serious. And from what I understand, some of the sources I've talked to at both Georgia and Texas, this story is utter crap, basically. That he's a great teammate. And, the guy, he performs. He performs. But again, guys, I've got some articles out there. You can check them out on all my socials. You can check them out on Yard Barker now. I want to say congratulations to the college football dogs. Now I've signed a deal to syndicate our content with the Yard Barker, so you can check them out as well. You'll find I was very fortunate, very blessed that my article about the Oklahoma Spring game was the first one to be published on the Yard Barker site. But check them out. You can check out collegefootballdogs.com. A lot of great articles. We got some really good writers, and it's going to be a lot of fun. Stay aware. All right. College football is a year-long thing now. We know with the transfer portal, we've got guys covering every conference. We got guys covering every team. If you're looking for, Kansas State information, if you're looking for Oregon information, if you're looking for Cleveland Brown information, we have it on the Dogs Network. But again, I want to say thank you for all of you who logged in, spent some time with me tonight. I'll be back next Tuesday. Remember, next Tuesday, I'm going to have Toby Rowland, the voice of the Oklahoma Sooners, the play-by-play guy, the legend, Toby Rowland himself on the show. Until then, everybody, take care of yourself, man. Remember to always positively move forward.
Thanks for joining us on this delicious journey through the world of sports and food on Sports Bites with your host, Chris Joseph. We hope you've enjoyed the game day stories and culinary adventures. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button. And if you've got any mouth-watering sports-related tales or favorite game day recipes, share them with us on social media. Until next time, remember, it's not just about the game. It's about the bites that make it unforgettable. Stay hungry for more Sports Bites.